She's responding for everything.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of the 4 at 4. Your panel for the show is comprised of 4 published authors. We have Melody Brooke with melodybrook.com, marriage and family counselor, corporate consultant, actress, producer, and advocate. We have Monica, who will hopefully be joining us with momsunshackled.com, who is a certified health coach, lobbyist, activist, and advocate. Sherry Palmer with Fixed Family Courts, a constitutional scholar, co-founder of the National Family Law Policy Center, activist and advocate. And we have, for the first time, our 4th official member, Catherine McWillie. She's the founder of CustodyCalculations.com, a retired LAPD officer, a parental alienation and CPS conflict expert and advocate. And I am Lorelei. I will be your host. All 4 are strong, independent women who have developed programs and materials that help parents and their children heal from the trauma of separation or divorce and manage their lives through the family court process. Today we will be discussing the unfortunate and traumatic mass shooting that happened and what are some ways that we may be able to prevent them.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to give a little more detail on the topic here. So for any of you who don't know, and I bet most of you do, there was an unfortunate mass shooting incident in Thousand Oaks at Borderline Country Bar. And it was college night. There were many students from Pepperdine University and other surrounding colleges that were enjoying a night of dancing and socializing together when a hooded male came into the entrance of the club, shot the security guy on the front, and then came in to further into the entrance and turned and shot a couple other security guys. And then I guess they said use some kind of automatic type of magazine that is illegal in California to spray the crowd with bullets for about 3 minutes. There were many hero officers and other people in this event or incident. Unfortunately, Sheriff Heelis lost his life when he rushed in to help protect people. He ended up in a gun battle with this person, and as is tradition, I'm not going to use the person's name even though they use it all over the media right now, but he was a Marine and he was a trained gunner. So naturally, whenever the police force go into situations like this, they don't really know what they're dealing with. So he had no idea this guy was pretty good at shooting. Fortunately, though, and unfortunately, only 12 people died, even though he sprayed bullets for 3 minutes. And I think I'm going to defer to Catherine, since Catherine is a retired LAPD, to kind of let her explain to you maybe a little bit about how her thoughts are on this before the rest of us get into our ideas on it. So, Catherine, I know this kind of came as a surprise to you as well, and you were receiving information that this occurred. So I know you read a little bit on it. From your background and your perspective, what kind of things would you share with people when things like this happen?
Well, first of all, I want to back up a little bit and really address the fact that this is really a heinous crime. It was a cowardly act against unarmed citizens, and really all of us on the show send our prayers out to the families of those who lost loved ones and those who were injured. And I also want to recognize that there was a lot of heroes last night in the shooting. We had stories of patrons coming out of the bar saying that, individuals actually used their own bodies to shield them, to protect them from the shooter. One was even an off-duty officer, a bartender who helped a patron hide in the attic at the location, climb a ladder up into the attic. Others who used a bar stool to smash a window and then help patrons climb through the window while they were watching for the gunman. So their focus was watching for their safety, but they didn't go through the windows. They were helping everyone out. And so, I think we really need to recognize at a time when the country seems to be going through so much, and we're saying so many things against each other, and conflict over political issues, that really these heroes prove that this country is in safe hands in many respects.
Yeah.
So I really want to say that. And that information is really relevant to your question, which is what do patrons or what can people do to protect themselves? And the number one issue is that you always have to be aware. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to, in your mind sometimes when you go into a location, not only for a shooting situation, but even for a fire or, we've had several incidences where buildings have collapsed due to natural disasters or building codes. So just people should go in and be familiar with the exits. That's just something that, as officers, we do off duty and on duty is look for those things. And the other is to, have a cell phone ready and, be able to call people, duck, move out of the area, get behind something, follow, other people if they, if go away from the shooter, go away from the sound as much as possible, and do the things that they did last night, grab bar stools and break windows. Don't look for just normal exits, really look at these options. Now, I didn't get a chance, as you said, because of the short notice to really pull some stats, but, relatively so, as often as we have recently been dealing with some of these mass shootings, they're still, for the most part, a rare occurrence across the United States. But as I always said as an officer, because I'm retired now, is that statistics mean nothing if you're the victim of a crime. So the focus always needs to be on be aware of your surroundings, look for exits, and be familiar with alternatives. Just sort of play scenarios. And, what I think made this situation particularly difficult, and I don't know if people are familiar with Thousand Oaks, but it's about 40 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. And I think it was last year that it was named one of the safest cities in Los Angeles. So, in the country, not Los Angeles, in the country. So these are college students on a college night. They're, in one of the safest communities in the United States, and something like this tears apart everything that they thought would ever be possible to their community and to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And thanks for mentioning the prayers for everyone else. Melody, I know that this topic's very tough for you. Do you want to tell us what your thoughts are on this?
Well, the obvious thing is that we've got to start addressing what's happening with our young men, because by far the majority of the shooters are young men who seem to be in some kind of psychological distress. And it seems to me that we are failing our young men, especially for some reason our white, because it's almost always white young men that are doing these things. And somehow we're creating an environment where they think that's the way to express themselves instead of finding a healthy outlet for whatever it is they're going through.
Well, did you see, I know we kind of did a topic change on you all of a sudden at the very last minute. So I don't know if you saw this, but let me tell you what I read as well about him. Not only was he one of our veterans with honorable discharge from the Marines in 2013, he did one tour that I know of in Afghanistan. But his mother recently in the last year, and this is kind of why I wanted to talk about this topic as well, just recently in the last year, she was very, very worried about him, very concerned. They didn't really elaborate on it. She wasn't concerned for her own safety. She said she was concerned about him and I think it was his mental stability, but she said he wouldn't get help. She didn't say for what. And then more recently than that, within the last few months, the police went out and said that when they went to talk to him, they had to call out some mental health people. They had a little chat with him, but they said that it wasn't severe enough to do a 5150, which Catherine can explain in a minute. And so they left him there, so they didn't do any further mental health things, but they also described him as irritable, irate kind of behavior. And so some people might think, oh, there you go, that's the sign, but remember, guys, we are looking at this in hindsight. So I wanted to talk about, yes, we're not getting people the help that they need. However, there's a fine line that I like to point out, and that's, you show up to somebody's home. Okay, yes, mom has expressed some concern, and police show up and they're describing somebody a certain way. And as you all know, we've recently had an experience with some in our area, and I don't want to discredit the police. I'm sure that they, in this situation, sounds like they handled it properly. However, I do know circumstances where they have, said that somebody was a certain way, but maybe that's their demeanor. So it wasn't necessarily that there was anything wrong with the person, just that maybe they're unhappy talking to police or.
Lost your audio.
Yeah, we lost our audio. So.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing her say is talking about the effect that the police have on.
It looks like she's trying to talk.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, I couldn't hear you, but I'm just a little bit cautious because I think there's a lot of people out there that are going to say that, oh, they missed it, and look at all the signs, because we hear that all the time. But I don't know, other than mom knowing that he needed something, because he's irritable and the cops show up. I mean, do you think, like, Catherine, do you think they made a mistake by not taking him in for 5150?
Well, I've done myself many 5150s, and for those that are unfamiliar, it's a term used to place someone on a mandatory minimum 3-day hold, and then the citation or the number assigned to that code is 5150, and they have to be a danger to themselves or to others. So when we come out and we speak to someone, and let's say they're irritable, like supposedly he was, but his demeanor may have been spent, yeah, I'm angry, I just had a fight with my mom, or, I'm unhappy with the neighbor, yeah, I'm a little frustrated. That doesn't meet the legal standards that we as officers are allowed to utilize to put someone on hold. Otherwise, imagine all the people that would be on 3-day holds because they had a fight with their wife or girlfriend, a boyfriend, their child. There'd be nobody left in their homes. So we're mandated that we can only take certain actions if they display that they're a danger to themselves or to others. And then what happens is, if they do meet, in our estimate, an initial assessment that they are a danger to themselves or to others, then we take them to a psychiatric facility, and they're then further evaluated by, psychologists, psychiatrists, to determine if they do indeed meet that. And certainly if he had been talking about hallucinations, if he had been talking about hearing voices, if his mother had said to officers, in other words, we don't know if the mother was present when the officers were called, because according to what I read, is it was a neighbor who called, and the neighbor called on the shooter because he was yelling and disturbing and banging, inside the house. And he just thought that was rather erratic and was concerned for him, because this is a 28-year-old man who has fought in the wars, who fought for this country, fought for our freedoms. And so it appears that the neighborhood was protective of him and wanting to make sure that he was safe, that he was healthy, that he had some mental health services provided if that's what he needs. But oftentimes this can take a while to manifest itself, or when the officers come out, even when we take somebody in custody, it doesn't mandate that the facility will agree that there's a psychiatric hold.
Right.
And I've had that happen
and
many times.
I've had that experience with my clients. I've had clients who I've had to make those calls to because I was concerned they were making threats for themselves or someone else. And the police showed up and talked to the person presented just fine. And, they walk away. I've had other times where they were taken into a mental health facility for those 3 days and they convinced the staff to be fine. They walked out the door and killed themselves. So,
okay. But the point is, just because somebody calls someone out and the person's agitated or irritable, that doesn't mean they're what I'm seeing termed a presumptive murderer, right? Correct. And so, but things like this happening, I don't know. I'm kind of worried that people are going to get like more overly protective and they're going to be like wanting stricter laws, right? They're going to want people to take them in every time because now they're going to worry they're missing one.
But I think the point is that taking them in isn't solving it either.
Right. And that's what really what I'm talking about is addressing the cultural issues that these young men have, less the immediate I'm looking at preventative rather than interventions, and looking at what we're doing as a society or as a culture that's setting these men up to have this way of an outlet for their emotions rather than helping them develop the kind of psychology, the kind of cultural environment where they can express their feelings in a healthy way and get help before it escalates to that point.
Right, but it's the kind of prevention that I'm worried about. Okay, because like if we're going to use police as prevention, then I get a little worried about that. Yeah, but then you can't force them to go. And his mom was trying to get him to go.
But what is it that I'm talking even back up even further than that. What is it happening in our culture that's setting them up to have that violent a response to their emotions? And what are we doing as mothers, as fathers, as teachers, as counselors in the environment that set these guys up to not feel safe to express their emotions any other way? What is it that's in the culture?
Okay.
Because unless we address that, nothing's going to change. Because obviously these interventions, you can maybe that kid in Florida could have been spotted ahead of time. There were plenty of signs there. But this guy, I don't know.
Well,
the guy got the synagogue up, I don't know. Could we have stopped them? I don't.
Yeah, but like I would say I think our culture's gotten way oversensitive to like yelling. So what if somebody needs to yell, right? As long as they're not yelling, like they're not like he's not saying, oh, I'm going to kill you, neighbor, right? What if he's just yelling out of frustration? He's just outside. He's frustrated. He's loud. Okay. That's, in my opinion, that's First Amendment protected. That's not illegal. And I think because people get so worried about others yelling, all of a sudden the guys have to keep this bottled in.
Yes, there's definitely, I'll agree with that, because what I have experienced is enough people have suffered abuse through violent family members that the anger gets equated to violence. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we become so sensitized to anger, is because we have this idea that it means if somebody's angry and they're yelling, that means violence is going to happen.
Right, because I think most people understand that yelling and, anything physical is typically a less controlled response to their emotions. So if they're yelling and acting erratic or yelling at all out in public and stuff, the common consensus for the community is that that person is not in control of their emotions, or they are a potential danger. And that's going to be for anyone. If you start yelling at someone, you have lost control and your sensibility. It's like when you yell at a child versus you sit them down and talk them calmly. Like, there's a completely different mood, and it shows that person is not as good at regulating their emotions, and they need a more appropriate outlet for their emotions anyway. Even if yelling's not illegal and not the worst thing there is, it's still a demonstration that they don't have control over the emotion they're experiencing.
Yep. Absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And it shows the possibility of emotional and verbal abuse, which I don't know about anybody else, but I've been in the effect of that, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. So in a lot of the examples I think we get growing up yelling wise, you know how you said it's equated to violence? Yeah. I just watched the special on Joan of Arc the other night on Netflix, and what did they do when she was preparing herself, and they called it a transformation? They showed her yelling, like not yelling at anybody, but just kind of like, ah, you know, like the warrior kind of yell, right? And that was her transformation into a warrior. And what do we see on all the cartoons and the manga, right? So they always like yell before they attack.
Yelling is still a form of release, so it can still be a therapeutic thing when you have control over it. However, I think that if you actually look at people who commit suicide or commit these murders and things like that, they're not out there yelling. They're actually can be quite calm and collected, so you don't always see that sign. That could be a completely irrelevant factor to these mass shootings.
True. That's a good point.
Well, I would also be concerned that as this discussion progresses, what I sometimes hear that concerns me is because we raise our voice, you know, how far are we going to go with some of these conversations? Suddenly raising our voice means we're at risk. You know, suddenly because we yell, suddenly because we're excited, we're underexcited. I think there's far too much regulation sometimes. And, you know, anger and frustration is not necessarily a negative in the right context. You can be frustrated because you didn't get good grades. You can be frustrated because you wanted to do better on a test. You can get frustrated because your team lost. And you can be mad and angry, but that is not necessarily a dangerous emotion. What I think we're lacking is that we've lost touch with, you know, how far is too far, how little is too little, and what is acceptable. And we've also seen a lot of these shooters have a background where the parents were divorced, where they were high conflict families, and I'm kind of bringing that back because that's what my expertise is involved in is, you know, the crime and family law and, you know, as a result of these custody battles.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I was trying to refer to is that we got to look at what is the driving thing that's setting this culture up to happen this way. And I think that's got to be part of it.
Yeah. And what I hear is a lot of times in divorces, dads get separated out of the lives, and I'm not discounting mom's importance. It's just culturally that's what's happened in our last couple generations. And so I think that boys specifically don't learn those tools that they need to work through those frustrations.
I think that's right. The thing is that men in general are, which was a surprise to me, actually far more sensitive than women are. You know, from the sperm on, they're more fragile than we are.
Yeah. Women are pretty tough.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I want to really address that for just a moment. And, you know, we have women who have, you know, murdered their children. We've had women divorce who have shot their parents. So I really, when I do presentations, while there is certainly more violence committed by men against others, there is a growing number and recognition of men as victims of domestic violence and women. You know, we had 3 incidences on the East Coast some months ago where women murdered their children and then themselves, and they were like back to back. And so we really need to recognize that this is not a gender issue. This is a problem in general with family law, if we're going to narrow that scope to family law.
We only have like 3 more minutes, you guys. So let's just,
it's always white men.
I know.
White men. And that was the original.
You're broken.
She said that it's statistically more white males who commit the mass murders of the shootings.
Yes, that's correct.
So before we get to the end of this, I did want to all of us to kind of wrap up like where we think that this should go. One of my positions is that, or my perspective is that we need to stop interfering with parents and their ability to parent their children. We need to stop cutting children out of one of their parents' lives so that they can get the tools and the coping mechanisms from both sides. And we need to stop worrying about little stressors that they go through, because that helps them learn how to cope with these things in society. And that's my take on it. And by the way, it's protected by the First Amendment, our association with our children. And that's why we need to continue to fight to protect that. And go ahead, Catherine and Melody.
And yes, absolutely.
So,
right, that meant
go ahead, Melody.
Dads have to have an influence of their boys, in particular on this subject matter, because that's how they can learn to regulate their emotions better, is so they have a guide of their paternal figure to do that. Without that, it's really proven out through the shootings that have happened that's something that's really missing.
Yeah, I would agree with both your statements, definitely. And so I don't have anything else to add at this moment.
Yeah, so Melody, one last thing. So if spanking can cause so much damage, what do they think it happens when children lose support systems, right? I mean, that's got to be right up there.
Right.
Yeah, we know it's up there. We know there's statistics.
That's abuse.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of abuse. It's a forced abandonment abuse is what I would call that.
So it's interesting that really it comes down to, for all of you girls, it comes down to the community, the preventative, and the fact that there needs to be more support, more emotional development, more parental and family core values, and it really has very little to do with taking away guns or things like that.
Yeah, if you go taking away guns and regulating things, you don't make yourself safer. What he had was illegal. The magazine that he used was illegal. If you start taking away those away anyways, they'll make
Sherry, it's really important to recognize he actually purchased this gun legally. It was the magazine, and I'm not even sure about the magazine, but he definitely purchased the gun legally.
And we want people to put more input. We have less than a minute, so we just want to say, please keep adding your input, and all you girls can keep commenting and responding in case we get cut off.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right, Catherine, but what they were saying is that magazine itself was illegal to have in California. So what I'm saying is making more things illegal is just hurting innocent good people, because they have no way to protect or defend themselves. Because no matter how good we make life, you're always going to have some outliers. Maybe it won't happen as frequently, but it's going to happen. And so you can't don't make laws that prevent people from